Good afternoon. On behalf of the Center for Community Progress, I would like to welcome you to today's Cornerstone webinar. My name is Christina Carter Grant, and I serve as the Program Officer for National Leadership in Education here at Center for Community Progress. Cornerstone is our webinar series, which equips participants with the building blocks to understand and solve tough challenges related to property vacancy, abandonment, and deterioration. For today's Cornerstone, we are joined by Janell O'Keefe and Evaine. Janell O'Keefe serves as the Senior Program Officer for Michigan Initiatives at the Center for Community Progress. At Community Progress, she supports the organization's work in Michigan and spearheads the organization's work on vacant land stewardship, which aims to inspire and foster the necessary systems-level policy changes to support long-term, large-scale reuse of vacant land that will build healthier, more resilient communities across the nation. Evaine K. Singh has a background in landscape architecture, public policy, and nonprofit management. She has worked on vacant land and general blighted property issues in a community development context for the past 15 years and works with all parts of the system from municipal program design and data-driven planning to volunteer-led efforts in under-resourced communities. Now, before we get started on today's webinar, I want to mention that we will allow time at the end of each presentation to answer questions. If you do have a question during the presentation, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your webinar browser and type your question into the Q&A box. We will share presentation slides and a video recording of today's presentation in the week following. If you experience any technical difficulties, please send us a message by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your browser or by sending an email to Christina Carter Grant at ccarter@communityprogress.org. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Janell.
Thank you, Christina. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to get started today. I'm going to share my screen with you all. I will start us off, and then Evaine will join me for the second half of today. So good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Christina, for those introductions. Today, we're going to discuss the fundamental elements of vacant land stewardship. Community Progress has been supporting communities to address their vacant land inventories in many ways over our past decade plus of work. Through that work, we've seen a few major and pretty universal barriers to vacant land reuse and repurposing happening. The first being the prevailing notion that the highest and best use of a lot is always something bricks and mortar. So this thought that we can't do anything with this lot until we can build on it again. Stemming from that, the second barrier is there really is a limit to what people think is possible with vacant lots and in communities that have substantial vacant lot inventories. And even when those two barriers don't exist, either among individuals in a place or the community at the community scale, there hasn't been a guide or a toolbox to draw from to start to look at vacant lot inventories comprehensively. Over the last couple of years, Community Progress took a deep dive into how to start to address those three barriers. We conducted surveys, we did research interviews, we did site visits, we looked at current and past research, we held focus groups, you name it, we probably did it. All of that combined with our years of experience working on these issues with local communities resulted in our recently launched Vacant Land Stewardship Online Resource Center. It is chock full of resources to inform you, inspire you, and ultimately help you implement vacant land stewardship. Today, we're going to deep dive into one of the features of the ORC. I will cover that, and then Evaine will hop on and we will walk through some case-by-case scenarios of where sorry, I froze on my end. Wanted to make sure it wasn't for everyone. Walk through some scenarios of how to use the ORC to answer your questions as practitioners. So first, what am I talking about when I say vacant land stewardship? For community progress, the definition we use is the comprehensive, intentional repurposing and maintenance of all vacant lots in a community in service to that community's needs, priorities, and goals. That's a heavy, detailed definition, so let's break it down a bit. Comprehensive, that means we are looking at all parcels as part of the whole, not a lot by lot. Second, intentional, meaning that next purpose for an individual lot and lots collectively is thought out, it's planned, it's implemented with consideration for those priorities, needs, in the context of the place where it exists. 3, repurposing. This is an intentional word choice, giving a new purpose to a lot, which could be everything from a native prairie project to a solar energy field to an infill housing development project. But it's really about what purpose is that lot serving for its place and its community now. Maintenance. This means both the basic maintenance of lots as they exist right now, mowing, snow removal, trash pickup, brush clearing, and maintaining of whatever new purpose is given to that lot. All vacant lots. This might feel redundant to the word comprehensive, but we really want to underscore that a community doesn't get to what community progress considers vacant lot stewardship by only thinking about or addressing a couple lots or a small proportion of their inventories, and in service to community needs, priorities, and goals. This is really where what stewardship comes into play. There is so much opportunity with vacant lots, but the opportunity will be squandered if it's not centering residents and what existing residents want to see their communities look like. So how do we move towards vacant land stewardship? How do you start on the journey? Over the last few years, through that work I just mentioned, Community Progress also worked with practitioners and researchers to tease out those fundamental elements. So through our surveys, our interviews, and our own experience supporting communities, we identified 4 fundamental elements. Knowing your community's context, having clear goals and plans, committing to collaboration, and enacting facilitative policies. There is, of course, an abundance of detail contained within each of those elements, and likely an infinite number of ways to connect and implement them. And that's exactly as it should be. Vacant land stewardship should have some universal features across communities, but within each individual place, what it looks like on the ground will be as different and unique as those places themselves. So I'm going to walk through these 4 elements now. Context. Before a community can take a comprehensive approach to vacant land, it needs to know the comprehensive picture of its place and that land. It's hard to address a problem without a clear understanding of its full scope, and it's hard to take advantage of an opportunity without it understanding the full scope. When we discuss context as a core element, that includes historical and current context. How did your vacant land come to be? What is the condition of those lots? What important history and likely equity issues are tied to the existence of vacant land in your place? What used to be on those lots? What community and cultural ties might exist to those specific places? Current data. How many lots are there? Who maintains them? What is that costing? What are they zoned? What are the demographics of the neighborhoods that they exist in? What are population trends and tax foreclosure trends? What is your potential pipeline for future vacant lots? And does that data all speak to each other? Can you connect different points by parcel ID or by addresses? Can you access data from other departments and entities so that you can bring multiple data pieces together to build a comprehensive picture? An up-to-date parcel inventory. really knowing what the current condition is of lots. How many have dumping? How many have large trees? How many are being maintained by the neighbor already? Where are they? Who are they owned by? Are they mostly publicly owned or privately owned? Where are they in a tax foreclosure process? Are taxes being paid on them? What is around them? Are they near other vacant lots? Are they near dense housing? Are they adjacent to parks? Are they in floodplains? What else is happening around them that might inform what they could be in the future? And then finally, existing efforts. Do you know who's already engaged in vacant lot land work in your community? Are there urban agriculture or food access organizations or friends of parks or tree canopy efforts where folks may already be repurposing lots or at least having conversations about how vacant land inventories can lead and play a part in their efforts? The second element, plans. Communities will be hard pressed to capitalize on the opportunity vacant land presents if you haven't done the work to set collective goals and priorities. And this is what we've seen through a lot of our work, is there's a lot of great projects happening in neighborhoods, in multiple cities across the country, but not many collective pushes bringing all of that work together. So what makes a plan that would check this fundamental element box? One that centers resident voices. In many places, residents have been taking on the burden of vacant lot maintenance already. Plans should center those experiences and those hopes and dreams. Plans should be focused on equitable outcomes for existing residents. A plan should identify the purpose of your vacant land work. Identifying the collective end goal or goals, which probably isn't build a house on every lot, but you need to have the conversations to get there, and those will take time. The plan should address the full scope of your vacant land challenge or opportunity. As mentioned previously, addressing a few lots here and there isn't going to have that substantial community-wide change impact. While it will have significant impact on the blocks and the neighborhoods it occurs in, really getting to that scale level change will take looking at most, if not all, of your lots. And a good plan is one that doesn't just sit on a shelf. So a plan should have a plan to revisit and update every few years so that the plan stays responsive and adaptive to changing contexts and conditions and can remain reflective of a community's needs and priorities over time. While this could happen in a variety of ways, it likely will be done through a strong land use plan, which may be something like an open space plan or a parks plan, or it may be a full-blown master plan. The third element, and I will say we're doing this in 1, 2, 3, 4 order. That does not indicate that's the order you have to start to address these in. Collaboration. Vacant land stewardship truly takes a village. Everyone has a role to play. Land is the foundation of all of our communities. And just like everything else that happens in community, there are multiple roles needed and many, many people needed to make it happen. True collaborative relationships, though, take time. They get built over time and are sustained over time. Working on some of those previous elements, like a neighborhood plan, a master plan, a parcel inventory, updating data, can be a great way to start building and repairing relationships between stakeholders. And stakeholders will range from residents to community organizations to those niche nonprofits I mentioned earlier, like food access groups, local government, regional government, philanthropy, academia, the private sector. So folks like attorneys and insurance agents and landscape architects. Collaboration will be necessary among these groups for all the reasons I just stated, but also among the resources they bring to the table that make vacant land stewardship possible. So an example of leveraging multiple funding sources to make projects happen. When you are collaborating, everyone can stretch their dollars a lot farther by bringing multiple streams to the table. Some of the most successful projects and programs we have seen come from multiple partners bringing a combination of private, public, and philanthropic dollars, along with plant material, tools, technical expertise. And by bringing those multiple pots to the table, everyone stretches their dollar further, whether that project only costs $100 or $100,000. The last fundamental element we'll touch on today is those facilitative policies. So many of the uses, ownership models, and programs that are being created to address vacant land and will be created in the future aren't addressed in local policies. Either they're just not there, or local policy currently prohibits them or prohibits ways to be innovative in this space. Even when those policies do exist, it's not enough to just have a policy that allows something to happen, right? I think we see that through all the policies community progress talks about when it comes to vacant property. People need to know that a policy exists, that they can do the thing they're dreaming of. That policy needs to ultimately create the things it's intended to, and people need to be able to navigate that policy and actually use it. That means taking a deep look at, what do the forms look like? How accessible are they? Where do they live? Do you have to pick them up in person, in hard copy? Can you get them on the internet? What are the fees like for things like building permits and change of use and site plan review processes? What other requirements do your policies put in place that might be hindering or facilitating vacant land stewardship in your place? And the best way to start to change those and think about those is to design your policies with your end user in mind. And with vacant land stewardship, that often means the least experienced user in mind. While communities may have some very large vacant land stewardship projects, depending on your inventory of vacant land, you're likely going to have a lot of very small projects done by residents, small businesses, neighborhood groups, small nonprofits. Your policies and processes shouldn't require someone to be a knowledgeable, decades of experience real estate developer in order to navigate. There are a multitude of policies, both big P, like zoning ordinances, and little p, like land bank disposition policies, that touch vacant land stewardship. They will touch it from every part of a project, from when you first look at identifying a site, so land acquisition, taxes, property taxes, business taxes, etc., to what that use, potential future use is. So things like waste management policies, water management policies, food safety policies, to the use being maintained over time. So things like code enforcement, to how do we fund this use? How do we make it happen? So outside of those kind of bucket of local government policies, you also have things like philanthropic grant applications and eligibility and reporting requirements, private sector things like insurance, both liability and business insurance. It's a long list. It is not intended to overwhelm, but to showcase that just about everyone can assess their policies and programs with vacant land and resident users in mind, even if you have nothing happening with vacant land in your community yet, and begin to improve them for equity, effectiveness, and efficiency. As I mentioned at the beginning, as communities begin this journey towards vacant land stewardship, we've launched our new online resource center, and we're going to jump over to that now. If you'd like to follow along, you can find it at communityprogress.org/resources/vacant land. I'm going to have Evaine jump on and join me, and I'm going to click out to the actual ORC. we're going to walk through some commonly asked questions that CCP receives and that practitioners on the ground experience, and use the ORC to get some answers. So I'll let Evaine hop on and I will switch screens.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. And hi, I'm Evaine. As Janell mentioned, she's going to keep driving because we didn't want to tempt the Zoom gremlins any more than we needed to. So bear with us as we think through this. So as mentioned at the beginning, I come at this issue definitely from a practitioner standpoint. So that means wanting to do stuff and see stuff get done. But also recognizing that that means that you need to be able to work kind of above and below and around you with pretty much everyone else that this issue touches. So that means answering to the residents on the ground who are experiencing the struggles related to this issue personally. It means working with other service providers that may have really specific goals, as Janell mentioned, maybe food access or stormwater or just general, economic development. And it also means, working with as best you can with the leadership of a municipality, the local government. And that's not just one entity, right? That is a public works department, that's a zoning office, that's a planning department, it's the mayor's staff or whomever. And so all of those people have different goals, different ways of moving forward, and they all have a role to play. So really understanding how all those pieces fit together help us figure out how to work on this issue more comprehensively. The things that Janell went over is a little bit more of the, what you will find on the site and a little bit of why we've chosen those things to highlight. And as we walk through the actual online resource center and the tools that we embedded, I'm going to focus a little bit more on who's going to benefit from using this and maybe how they might navigate some of these tools and the information that we've provided. So just kind of putting on, different mindset as a consultant. Again, my work deals with people all across the board. So just thinking about some of the questions that I get asked regularly and how I might now use the ORC to provide some answers. We just wanted to walk through a few scenarios of how people might do that on their own as well. So first one, thinking, maybe this question comes from often, a resident or a group of residents who are, recognizing vacant land as an issue and not maybe knowing what they can do about it or what's being done in their own community. So they want to start by just understanding what's possible and seeing what else is out there. So a great piece of this and a very simple, one of the simpler pieces of the tool would be to just look at other projects as examples and ideas for what other people have done, and not have to search city by city on Google, but to actually just kind of get to a place where you are presented with a lot of really great projects and ideas and things that have been done so that they are possible. That might help assess whether or not that's something that you could take on or suggest to someone in your community as well. So going to the under the resource center, going under the vacant land stewardship and going to vacant land projects, we are rewarded with a really lovely database of some examples across the country that partners have submitted themselves. So again, this work is coming from the people who have done the work, which again adds that level of feasibility and makes it feel like we can do this. If someone else can do it, then we can do it as well. But a great piece of this tool, and we apologize because apparently it's not perfect just yet, as with all new tools and toys to play with. But there's a great function that will allow you to sort of filter some of these options a bit more. So let's say I operate primarily in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. So I might want to know what else has happened in Pennsylvania because we have a different climate, we have different laws, we have different state legislation. And so that may just help me narrow down some realistic ideas. So if I narrowed it down by state right now, it's showing that there are 3 projects that have been submitted that I could take a deeper dive on. And if I click on any of those, then we're greeted with a nice landing page that just features a little bit about the project. So this is just a snapshot that allows you to be directed towards the organization who actually worked on the project and wanted to share this information. So we have a photo that they've submitted, we have the title and the location, and then some stats on the side of just the basic, how big was this project, how much roughly did this project cost? When was it completed? How, those types of things. And then a small description of just what the work was and a link out to that organization in however they share more about their work. So it could be a write-up, could be a PDF, could be, a link on their website, but allows you to kind of navigate to where you can find more. So again, the point, Center for Community Progress is not trying to recreate the wheel, and it's not trying to duplicate anything. And we really just want to make sure people can find things in an easy way. So you can see the filters include many different options from, again, the organizational type. So who was maybe the lead on a project? What were the goals of its use? How big was the project? The cost of the project, how long it lasted. We know that all of these things are factors to consider when reclaiming vacant land. Is it something permanent? Is it something that's meant to just draw attention to something? Is it an entire block? Is it just a small in-between parcel? All of these can help give ideas for maybe a specific area that you're looking at, or just generally, again, what's possible. So that's one really great and easy and fun, just inspirational area of the ORC that we wanted to highlight. So in the next scenario, let's say that maybe this is a community that is really just starting to recognize vacant land as a problem, as they look over their own portfolio, or realizing that they have actually got quite a few vacant lots in their on their inventory because they've just received some demolition funds and have been doing some strategic demolition across the community. So they know they now need to start thinking about what's next, but they are kind of not sure where to start and what pieces are needed. So this is a place where we're going to revisit some of the things that Janell talked about, and just going into the elements that she reviewed, the context, planning, collaboration, and policy section. So this page, just the fundamental elements, will show some of that detail that she shared even more about. But a great piece of this is then there's also a questionnaire or a self-assessment. So this is a great place to just for any entity to kind of say, where are we in this discussion? We know we need to be comprehensive. We know we need to make a plan, but what do we have to work with, and where do we need to really strengthen ourselves? So starting in, under those elements in each bucket, we put some questions together. So under the context bucket, I'm just going to answer these thinking about a community that I'm working with right now. So let's say, is vacant land a whole citywide or municipal issue? And I'm going to say yes here, but in some cities, maybe it's only a small neighborhood or a small block that is really struggling, and it's not necessarily overarchingly across the geography. The next question is there more than one group, like a neighborhood group, a local department, an elected official, community foundation, or nonprofit that is working on vacant land? So is this one person's white whale, or is this something that everyone is starting to see as being something we need to come together and address? Here I'm going to say no, unfortunately. We have a couple of people in municipal leadership that maybe haven't quite caught on yet. And so we know we have some work to do to bring everybody into the fold. And the last question is, do you have a current, in the last 3 years, an inventory of the portfolio? So that helps us know how much vacant land is there, what condition is it in, what's the ownership, what are some other things we need to know about it that would help us determine how to address it. Here I'm going to say yes, because one was just completed. And so that will be helpful as a baseline for us to move forward. So in the next set of questions under the planning mindset, do you have a current, and by current we saying updated or at least reviewed within the last 3 to 5 years? We know plans take a long time to actually ever be implemented. So we want to be a little bit broad with this time frame, but just wanting to make sure that if there is a plan, does it still feel like it is representative of the current situation? And does it specifically talk about land use and include vacant land as part of that discussion? So we're going to say yes here. Within that plan, are there clear and shared goals that were established by a representative group of the entire geographic area? So what do we mean by that? We want to know whether this plan was done in the dark corners of a city planning department, or was this a comprehensive community conversation that included stakeholders from different parts of the system? Unfortunately, we're going to say no here because while there were a few meetings, they were sort of invite only, not open to public comment and those types of things. Are current goals and plans available for review by the public and necessary partners? And is it transparent and open for reflection and critical milestones? So again, even if there's a plan that exists and is on the books, does everybody know that it's there? Does everybody know what it says? Can people raise their hand and say, have we met this goal, or has this goal shifted? Can we revisit? And I'm going to say no here. And generally, if there's not, if it wasn't done by a clear representative, often that speaks to maybe a breakdown in that communication. So it's pretty logical there. So under collaboration, so partnerships and working together, thinking about this. First question being, are residents, community organizations, funders, and local policy makers actively talking to each other about this topic? Unfortunately, no. So while maybe all of them are talking about it, they may not be talking to each other because everyone, again, often gets caught up in their own goals, time restrictions, capacity issues. But this may be a reminder that we need to maybe pause and bring everyone together. Is there available funding for vacant land work in your community? I'm going to say yes, because groups are getting funding to do different projects. But again, as Janelle mentioned, maybe those dollars could go further if we were to collaborate. Does your partner network have the wide-ranging skills to establish and sustain vacant land projects and programs? Here I'm going to say no, because we've seen that some of the investments made over the past few years have now faltered and aren't ongoing in a way that we had hoped they were. And so that implies that there's a missing piece somewhere. So maybe it was more on the stewardship side and maintaining something that has happened. Maybe it fell through in coordination with getting permissions or the proper, whatever is needed for that. So there can be lots of reasons for this, but it again helps recognize that we might need to do a scan of what we have and what we're missing. And then finally, under the policy section, is there a set of policies that focus solely on vacant land opportunities as identified in the planning processes? So as Janelle mentioned, this might be a specific policy around how to acquire vacant land or how to dispose of vacant lands and what permissible uses there are. And so I'm going to say no here. So while there are general zoning things that are allowed in the borough, there is not a specific call out towards the use of land that has been sort of deemed, I don't want to say unwanted, but sort of not thought through in a more clear way. Do the existing policies facilitate this work? Again, I'm going to say no, because we've often run into a situation where what's on the books tells us this is not possible. And yet there are grant programs provided by the municipality to encourage those types of uses. So it's a little bit of, and I'm sure people have run into this, where no one wants to say no, but also no one is willing to give you a yes. And there's definitely some contradictions, in what's written down versus what everybody wants to see. And that definitely, I don't want to say prevents, but maybe slows down the progress that could be made. Last question is, can an individual or an applicant or a resident navigate this process easily? So also as a practitioner in the middle space, I'm going to say no. This is something that I've run into numerous times where there is a way to acquire land, maybe to forgive the taxes, or there is a way to build a garden. But realistically, you have to kind of be on the inside to really understand how to get from point A to point B. Either the language is written in a way that is meant to, be protective and it uses a lot of legalese. Perhaps it is something that someone thought of as kind of as a secondary passing thought. And so it's buried deep into policies. And so that also slows down our progress in addressing these issues. So now that we've answered all of the questions, if we scroll down, you kind of get your own little assessment of some of the tools and programs and opportunities that we think might help enhance your standing of where you are currently. So suggesting some articles that can be read, some websites that can be visited, some of these webinars like today's that you could watch and catch up on, and all of those links. And this again is as a new tool, these findings and report outs will be growing and expanding as we get more content on the ORC. So what you see here is just the initial pass, but we hope to fill out all of these areas. So websites you can visit, ways you can engage, and then if and when you feel that you are ready to sort of take that actual step of putting things together, encouraging you to reach directly out to Center for Community Progress. So we don't expect the ORC to just solve everyone's issues, but we're hoping to provide them with a better baseline so that when they do seek help, it is much more focused and intentional, and we can put a plan together. So this is a great tool. You can, fill it out in lots of different combinations. Again, as a new tool, the report outs are going to be a little bit similar, but we're going to be working on expanding those over the next couple of years. So it'll start to become more robust, and the more ways that people use it will help us shape which content people really want to see. And we want to hear from you all on that and how to make that better. So next scenario would be something like, let's say I am, working for the city and I really want to know, or I'm working as a, with a nonprofit, want to know, where is the vacant land? What is its condition? How do I understand what helps the scale of the issue or the trends in the issue in my community? So basically, this would lead me to think about a data inventory, which, as Janell talked about, was under the context bucket, because you have to know what you're working with and in the context of your community in order to move forward. So going back to the system elements under context, here's a great opportunity to look to the featured example, which has Heartland Conservation Alliance vacant lot mapping tools. And if you click on that, that will lead us to that project and this organization who conducted their inventory, and talk a little bit more about the tools that they used, what data they maybe found in the public realm to analyze, and again, provide that additional context in real time. As we move forward, we are hoping to focus more on some logistics around data inventories and highlight some of the tools that we've seen cities use, maybe put together a panel of different entities that have done this work and let them share what their struggles have been and what has worked really well for them. But again, just recognizing that that information fits under that context system element would be helpful for you. In another scenario, going back to the vacant lot projects, and as you're looking through them, you might say, well, that project was cool, but we did something cool too. And I want people to see my project and to know about the work that we've done, since we worked really hard on it. And you'll see a lot of these things. There are multiple ways to navigate to these. So, you should see this on a couple of different pages. So to share your own project, you can either go to the title bar and click directly on share your project under the ORC, or you can go to the vacant lot projects page or the landing page and find example projects, and then click that sidebar to share your own. So the great thing about this is, again, it allows us practitioners to brag a little and share work that takes a lot of effort to do. But it also allows other people to, again, see what's possible and to feel like it is achievable in their own space. I would recommend, having done this a couple of times, kind of pull your thoughts together before you start the project. What's really great about this is that you can always revisit and finish filling it out. However, it's just helpful to be able to run through it. Yeah, if you hit save and continue later, you'll get an email that'll give you a link to get back into it. And there are a few pages of information to fill out. But gathering some of that ahead of time and having a couple photos that you want to share already sort of in a localized place that you could attach them will only make that a little bit easier. After you've submitted, if a project has changed over time, or you want to provide an update, or there's a better photo because it's a beautiful growing season, you'll always be able to go back into that project and update that information as you wish. So this is definitely something we'd love to encourage everybody on the call today to take a look at, maybe add a couple of projects. The more that we have on there, the more we have to share with others. And so really wanting to emphasize that. And then finally, one that is very important, and a question that I get a lot would be, okay, we need funding, which means we need to write a proposal. Is there any information that can assist me in writing a grant or putting in some kind of request? And so just going to the landing page or of the Stewardship ORC, if you scroll to the bottom, there are some resources and featured publications all the way at the bottom. And again, you'll see these links maybe on a couple of other pages. If you filled out the questionnaire, you might see them in the sidebar as a highlighted piece of information because they were recently published and promoted. But this is always where you'll be able to find it as well. And so just drawing attention to some of these things, we have a few things on here right now. The first one is the new manuscript, I think is what we're calling it. That was sponsored by the Federal Bank Reserve of Atlanta and Cleveland. And it's a sort of a looking back at how we've gotten to this issue broadly of vacancy and abandonment, but there are at least 1 or 2 articles in there specific to vacant land and greening. So that can be something that is citable, which helps provide an anchor for, an application or some kind of publication of your own. The second one is the America's Vacant Lot Landscape, and this is insights from the national survey that was conducted by CCP and the University of Michigan's Youth Violence Prevention Center in 2019. It was a national survey completed for greening organizations. This one has a lot of great citable data from the survey responses to say that, one that I can think of is, I think it was 76% of organizations are seeing that look at that, I did remember, are seeing that their inventories are basically vacant lands. And then despite that, many of them have said that, their funding hasn't grown in that budget or bucket area. And so those are great things to be able to put into a grant request to say, this is why this is necessary and important. The last one I want to highlight is the keys to success. And that is little fact sheets, and it's maybe less citable information, but more of we took the kind of big pieces that people were mentioning repeatedly, and we wanted to dive deeper into that to encourage people on how to do some of these things. So it's easy to say we should collaborate. How do you get that to happen if it hasn't happened yet? If we're talking about doing an inventory, how do you move forward? What steps are you actually taking? And so the keys to success focus a little bit more on those action steps and some suggestions for how these things can take place. So those are just a few ways that, and few scenarios of who might use this tool and the ORC and how they might navigate through it. It's all pretty, again, cross-referenced. So if you just go to the title bar and go to the vacant lot stewardship landing page, from there, you'll pretty much navigate out to all of these pieces that we have shared today. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Janell, and I think we're going to finish off, and then I'll let people ask some questions as well.
Yes, thank you, Evaine. Evaine teased some of my coming soon. So just to highlight kind of what will be in the next update to the ORC, we'll be adding additional projects that folks have submitted before the end of the year. So another plug, share your projects with us. We would love to have them featured. We'll be also adding some fact sheets. So as Evaine was just talking about, some easy to cite data on vacant land and its impacts and the importance and the positive impacts that come from doing vacant land work. Really wanting to make that accessible to the folks doing this work on the ground and not keep that stuff behind paywalls that lots of us can't access anyways. Additionally, next year we'll be building out an elements database. So you saw those featured examples. By mid-year next year, there'll be a searchable database of examples, just like there is for projects. And then, as Evaine said, we have a lot of plans for additional webinars and blog posts and other educational content that will roll out over the next several years. So there will kind of always be fresh and new stuff coming in through the ORC. So there's a couple questions I've seen come in already. I'm going to take a second to look at what's come through already. Please throw some more in. We've got a little, just less than 15 minutes to talk through questions. So we're happy to answer those. And I will leave us on a slide with Evaine and I's info, so you have time to take it down if you need to do so. So Patricia asked about the examples referenced in the PowerPoint. So if you didn't catch, those were all the featured examples on the Elements page. So if you want to link out to learn more about them, you can do that either from the PowerPoint when it gets sent out next week. There are links under the images, but you can also navigate to the ORC and go to the Elements page, and all of those will link out if you want to learn more about any of those featured examples. The next question is about being interested in affordable housing development, and if there's existed vacant buildings there, can I get funding for a project like this? That is, I'm sure you can. That is a level of kind of specifics and not specifics that we can't answer, but is certainly something to talk with folks in your local municipality about. Both the people working in who owns the land, whether that's a local land bank or your local government or county, and start talking with folks about what does the affordable housing and rehab repair landscape look like in your community. And then we have a question from some folks in Canada. We would absolutely love to feature your projects. While yes, Community Progress is primarily a United States national nonprofit, there are lots to learn from everywhere across the world around vacant land reuse projects. So absolutely submit it. We'd love to take a look at it. Oh, there's another one. Yes, we can. Raven, I would love to get your question, revisit Evaine and I's background in this space. I would like to give a moment if some other folks have questions. So we'll let those trickle in, but we can certainly re-intro ourselves. I am Janell. I'm on staff here at Community Progress, and I have been leading our build out of some more robust vacant land work over the last couple of years. Prior to joining Community Progress, I worked for about 7 years in urban agriculture and vacant land reuse in the city of Detroit. So a lot of on the ground community organizing around community gardens and production focused gardens and farms on vacant land. I spent most of my time helping gardeners and farmers navigate the land purchase process and working with gardeners and farmers and city government on updating policies, specifically zoning ordinance policies, but more than just that, to allow for and facilitate urban agriculture and other vacant land reuse uses. Evaine?
And I'm Evaine Singh. I have a background in landscape architecture. So I started my career in more of the typical design sector, but always been focused on community projects. I'm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So when I first moved here, just sort of recognizing the scale of the vacant land issue drew me towards that a little bit more. And it was a little more self-satisfying of design a project and actually build it in the same year versus more corporate design work. As I got into that, I realized there were just a lot of disconnects between the partners and the people involved. And so, you know, as a designer, I spoke a very specific architectural type language, but residents, you know, maybe didn't hear that, and local government used even other language, which encouraged me to go back for a public policy degree. So I've spent most of my career acting as a little bit of a middleman and a translator between all of those parties, and ensuring that even though we're having the same conversation, that we are also actually meaning the same things. And so I've spent most of my time as a practitioner, a little bit, I call it sort of the, I haven't come up with a better name, but the system sandwich of sort of the residents, the volunteers, and the doers. And then you've got sort of the service provider network in the middle. And then above that, you have the decision makers like the local government and the municipalities and the land bank authorities who actually have the authority to give permission to do things. And so being in that middle space allows me to sort of navigate top and up and down to, fill in those missing gaps. And in the last couple of years, I've been working with CCP and University of Michigan on some of the research efforts and just figuring out how to document, some of the work that I've been doing and feel is important, and wanting to see more happen around the vacant land issue, because it really is such an easy place to start to have an impact on community.
We will give it 1 or 2 seconds if there's any other lingering questions. Just want to reiterate to keep an eye to the ORC for updated content as we do that. Anytime something new and snazzy is up there, you will get an email. It'll go out in our headlines or get a specific launch email. So keep tuned to Community Progress's e-newsletter and our social media. There will always be, that you will always know when something is new there, but also feel free to visit the ORC often. Also, we'd love to hear how you are using it. So if you learned something great, you used the projects to design a project of your own, we'd love to hear those stories. So feel free to email me directly or email us at info@communityprogress.org if you have, stories you want to tell us. And if there's things you want to see in the ORC, this really is here to serve all of you out there tackling this issue on the ground in your neighborhoods and your communities. And we want it to be as responsive and useful as possible. So if you've got a great idea of something you want to see or a question you would love the ORC to answer and it's not doing it for you right now, please send me an email. We'd love to hear about it. This is a super interesting and specific question, so I'm going to tackle it and then I'll let us all end a few minutes early and ponder this ourselves. So the question is, in our experience, it is common for municipalities to demand that urban agriculture projects apply for a permit, which of course requires a payment. This question is asking, are we also seeing cannabis developers involved in vacant lot repurposing? I cannot speak from the national perspective on this or Community Progresses. We're not kind of engaged at the ground level to say how much that is happening. I can say I am seeing it where I live. And certainly any new industry, as they become allowed by local regulation and otherwise, land is always an opportunity. I think you'll see the same conversations around solar energy as we start to look at renewable energy resources and where can we put those things. Previously developed land in communities is going to become a part of that conversation. So say the answer to your question is probably location and municipality specific, but I think any emerging industry probably has a tie to vacant land, especially when you are looking at the other market context of communities where vacant land exists and the need for new and diversifying industries and job opportunities, et cetera. Evaine, do you have any?
Yeah, I would just add for the first part of that question, from what I've recognized, pretty much any use of a vacant lot, either in a lease or license situation, does require some kind of permit or application. What I've seen most common, again, this is not a universal because it's up to local municipalities, is that if it is something for community use, often there is no fee or a very minor fee that can be waived. If it is considered a business, so if there's going to be a farm stand or the produce is meant to be distributed or sold at market, that may be where fees are incurred, because then it's essentially in some ways a business tax alternative type of scenario. So that's what I've recognized more on that front. And then I will also say on the cannabis discussion, I am part of the architectural industry. And so right now that is a growing sector for sure. That is, again, where states and municipalities allow it. But again, the trend would be larger open spaces rather than, infill lots and things like that. So again, as Janelle mentioned, the context of place would really have an impact on that. And I know in Pennsylvania it is not allowed, so we don't really have it. But there's a lot of work happening in like New Jersey and New York and some other states as well.
Thank you all so much for joining us. There's a question popping in at the end. I'll make sure we answer it if we can in a follow-up. Thank you. Giving you a couple moments back in your day. We appreciate you joining us. Please visit the ORC, and I will hand it over to Christina for any closeout comments.
Awesome, great presentation. Thank you so much, Janelle and Evaine, and thank you everyone for joining our Cornerstone today. Please visit our website to learn more information about upcoming webinars, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Take care, everyone.